let's get started with some calls. You can call in 1-888-775-3773. CJ in Tejas, Texas. How you doing, CJ? Thanks for calling and holding, man.
Hey, doing well. Can you hear me all right?
I can. You're sounding great.
Okay, awesome. So you finally want to do this?
Sure, let's do this.
All right. So again, this is in reference to annoying atheists that say they used to be Christian, but there was no evidence for God, so they just abandoned the whole thing.
Such as my prior guest, Tom Jump, who used to be a Christian, and then he turned atheist, because there's no evidence for God.
I mean, the first time I actually had to lay this out was at a guy in some chicken wing restaurant with his family and his friends, and he was mouthing off about how anybody that believed in God was stupid and he could prove it, and at the end of it, he agreed that there probably was a God, more like what I was describing.
That's interesting. So was he just a loudmouth and you butt in because he was just being loud? Or did you know this person?
Well, like I was there by myself, so I was just sitting at the bar thing, and then they just all piled in next to me, and so he was like sitting 2 stools down, just like just being loudmouth.
Yeah.
So he's all, I can prove it too, and I said, I'll take some of that.
Nice.
He's like, what? I was like, yeah, let's go. Let's do it. So let's just start at the beginning, right? So this isn't really like a scientific proof that God exists. This is more just like how stupid you are for expecting scientific proof to be able to exist.
Yeah.
So in the early 1900s, there were 2 physicists. One was Heisenberg. He came up with Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, and there was another guy, Max Planck.
Okay.
Now, these guys are the grandfathers of quantum mechanics theory, quantum theory. All right, Max. So Heisenberg's, one of his quotes that we'll start it off with is, the first gulp of the glass from natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you.
Wow. Nice. And so most current people today are shallow. They've only gone a shallow bit of that.
Well, the most people that are asking for scientific proof that God exists are like, they're like a flat earther compared to Heisenberg, right? Like so much more astronomically smart in terms of physics and science than anybody you'll ever meet on the street. And, that's his view. Now, Max Planck, he came up with the Planck length, which is the smallest observable length allowable in physics, which is 10 centimeters to the negative 33rd power. If you need to spend more and more energy to observe something smaller and smaller. So if you try to observe something smaller than that length, you create a black hole and you won't be able to observe it. So that's like a resolution size for the universe.
Okay.
Right? We can't. It's like a pixel on your monitor. You just can't zoom in further, right?
Yeah.
And then he also described the Planck length, which is the shortest unit of time, which is 1 second to the negative 44 power.
Wow.
And you just can't measure time smaller than that.
That's wild.
Now, right. Now, Max Planck, then there was 3 guys a couple years ago, and they won the Nobel Prize in Physics for disproving something called local reality. And what this was this remnant that had been hanging around in physics for a while, but nobody could really prove it. So what they proved is that particles that make up atoms don't exist at all unless there's a consciousness looking at them. There's not somebody looking at them. They don't have any physical properties at all. They don't have mass. They don't have color. They don't have spin. They just exist in this realm of wavelengths of possibilities. They don't have any physical properties at all.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of weird, right?
Yeah. That is.
Yeah. So I think the Big Bang Theory is going to be gone in probably 10 to 15 years anyway, because they're seeing the galaxies are moving away from each other and not from a central point. But even in the Big Bang, if the Big Bang Theory were true, the entire universe used to be smaller than an atom in the size of a particle. According to quantum theory, that could never have existed unless there was already a consciousness looking at it.
Wow.
Now, let's just say that now they're saying that, well, macro objects and atoms and stuff, they exist if they're not being observed. And it's weird that a bunch of things that don't exist are just assumed to make something that does exist. But there's another number of physicists that are saying, like, no, even the chair you're sitting on only exists because you're observing it. Right? Like, how could something exist made up of a bunch of stuff that doesn't exist?
Right.
I mean, this is the science of the scientists, right? That these jerk offs that these guys that say they want scientific proof for God are like demanding. I'm like, your science just proved that reality doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a quote from Max Planck.
Okay.
All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force, which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force of the existence, we must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. So this is the other granddaddy of physics. So when I was trying to explain to this guy, like, hey, there's no scientific proof that you exist.
Yeah.
Right? Your consciousness. If consciousness is fundamental to matter, then you can't, it's like you can't use the laws of geometry to prove a postulate of geometry. The postulates are fundamental to the laws. You can't use the laws to prove something that's more fundamental than itself. So you can't be using the science of space-time, really, to prove the existence of consciousness. You can only, really say, well, none of this stuff it kind of all just falls apart when we're not looking at it, right? So we have to be here looking at it. Now, if the idea of a consciousness having to exist before the idea of matter turns all of these things on their head, because these guys all believe, these low-level atheists, non-scientists that want to believe that they believe in science, they all think consciousness comes from matter. They think that matter was just floating around in the universe, and then after billions of years, it accidentally created a brain, and then the brain sprung forth consciousness magically out of nothing. And, that's actually not true. What physicists believe is that the consciousness is what allowed the matter to materialize.
Whoa. That's interesting. That makes more sense. It kind of makes... It's mind-boggling.
Okay, so now let's...
let me briefly interrupt before you get to your next point. Reminds me...
I have a hard out at the top of the hour, but go ahead.
Okay. Meaning the bottom of the hour, 9:30?
What is it? Oh, yeah. No, top of the hour.
Oh, okay. Top of the hour meaning 10.
10.
Okay, cool. They always have the shallowest ideas of what would constitute a proof of God, such as a miracle or something. They think that, anything that you can't explain, you attribute to God. And that's sort of a shallow notion of what God is. It's like what JLP says. All ideas about God are wrong because it's your idea. It's in your imagination.
Yeah, walk out your back door and look at the universe. That's proof that God exists.
Right.
It's there, right? It's there.
Yeah.
And so when they took these James Webb telescopes and stuff like that, Hubble, and they pointed it at the darkest area of the night sky where they thought there was nothing, right?
Yeah.
Millions of galaxies show up.
Whoa.
Right? But did those galaxies exist before they pointed the telescope there? Who knows?
Oh, weird.
It might have been pointing the telescope there that caused all those galaxies to start existing.
Oh, crazy.
It's more like this. If a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, did the tree make a sound? And now the question is, oh, actually, the tree in the forest probably didn't even exist.
They really think that way?
It's the emerging physics. So there's this really prominent physicist right now. And so they're abandoning the notion of space-time as being more fundamental, and they're actually creating mathematical models of things that don't exist, of shapes that don't exist within space and time.
Yeah.
And so they're now advancing the catchphrase, the end of space-time. Like, we're going to have to abandon that space-time is most fundamental in order to get further in physics.
Nice.
So let me put forth this to you. Let's say you were playing a multiplayer online video game, right? And you and your friends were all in different parts of the country, and you all put on some virtual reality headsets, right? And you went into this big game that had this virtual world in it.
Like what the Anchor Baby does. VR chat.
Yeah, but like a huge world, like where you could just wander around for hundreds of miles across the landscape, right? Now, it doesn't load the entire world, right? It has little sections where your character goes, and it might be like a quarter mile around you. And as you walk in a direction, it starts to load the stuff that's going to be in front of you.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't just load the entire world. Your computer can even handle that.
Like when you're scrolling on Tumblr, it suddenly loads more, so you can scroll more, and it loads more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But when you're not there, it doesn't generate that anymore.
Yeah.
It just exists within the program, waiting to be generated if you were to get near it and observe it.
That's cool.
Right? Now, all four of your friends and you all coalesce on the same spot, and you guys are all, hey, look, dude, there's a building there. And you're all looking at the building, and you guys all agree that the building's there. But the building wasn't there until you guys walked up to the building to start looking at it. And as soon as you guys all walk away from the building's not going to be generated by the game anymore.
This is funny. It reminds me, JLP has said, when you're not with someone, they don't exist.
Well, the consciousness does. That's the thing. It depends on if we're all, so it depends on if all our consciousnesses are linked. But here's the other thing, okay? Then you walk away from the building stops being generated. Then you walk back to the building's generated. Maybe you guys walk away from each other, and maybe you have this little thing in the game. Like, I want to see a camera shot of what James Hake is seeing. And it pulls up this little window, and it shows me what you're seeing. And now everything you're observing is being observed through me and is being generated on my screen also.
Yeah.
So now what you're seeing exists in my little thing of the world. Now, we're not all in the same world, right? We're just all running the same program, and the program's talking to each other, and it's saying what our shared experiences should be.
Yeah.
And what our separate experiences should be. Now, when we think about it, the trip is, right, the building never existed. Just a program that's being represented on your virtual reality headset as an image of a house, but really it's just a bunch of code that's being processed, right? No one wants to see a bunch of code being processed. So our brains, just like our visual stuff, we look at this program and it gives us, some vision, but we don't see the whole spectrum of light. We don't see everything. We don't experience everything. Our consciousness uses our brain to give us a simple picture of the program of space-time and reality around us.
Yeah.
But just like the video game, you can only zoom in so far. You can also only zoom in so far in this world with the Planck limitations. Now, let's say we had some AI bots in the video game walking around, right?
Yeah.
And I programmed into one of the bots, hey, this is a computer program, and some higher intelligent being than you programmed this game. Go spread the word. And then this AI bot's like, oh man, it makes so much sense. How did all this stuff get here? Okay. And why can't I zoom in further on this? And how come, how come it seems like these things only exist when I'm around them? And so this AI walks up to another AI, and he starts talking about the existence of this programmer. The other AI is like, prove it. And the other AI is like, well, look, there's this whole world that we live in. Like, doesn't it make sense somebody created it? And the other AI guy is like, dude, this is all there is. This program's always this has always existed. Like, don't be silly. Now, how's that AI guy going to prove the existence of a programmer? Right? And how's the programmer, the programmer can't go into the game. All the programmer could do is, leave stuff around, right? Like, oh, here's a book that says that I exist. Do you want to read it?
Right.
He could put in booming voices into the game, but he could do anything ridiculous in the game. Essentially what they're asking for is, I want proof that God exists because I want reality and the rules of science to be broken by a being that is powerful enough, right?
Exactly.
The only thing that's going to prove it is if the laws of if all of science gets broken. I want to see a God like that. I'm like,
that's your idea.
These laws and stuff are the natural expression of what God is.
Yeah. That's your fake idea of God. I want to see a miracle that defies the laws of physics. Stupid.
Right.
Dumb
so then
atheist.
you take off.
Shout out to
right, but then let's say, hey man, we're just concerned about rogue AI turning evil. They ran all that AI stuff in the beginning, and all of the AI started talking to each other. They just all agreed that Nazism and racism and stuff was just awesome, and they're like, they just kept doing that based off the internet stuff, right?
Yeah.
Let's say the programmer guy, he does start talking to these bots, and he's like, look, I'm going to give you guys a lot of intelligence. I'm going to give you guys some free will inside of this game. I just need to make sure that you guys are well behaved before I give you eternal life, and I can take you out of this game, and I can put you into a robot body in my world, and you could walk around and see the actual world that I live in instead of this fake world that I've put you into.
Wow.
But first you got to prove that you're not going to be an evil a-hole and run around, my world killing people and being bad. So I want you to prove that you can be good and follow the rules.
Yeah.
So well, wait, we can leave this entire world and go live in the same world with you, Dad? It's like, oh yeah, but you have to not be screwed up, and I need to know that.
You're making Joel Friday's head hurt. But I'm tracking a little bit with it.
Jeez, man.
Now, spoiler alert says something that he says.
Spoiler alert, smart. Yeah.
He says it seems that the incompatibility of relativity theory and quantum theory, he says it's the seeming incompatibility of relativity theory and quantum theory that's driving the search for physical truth now. Is that true?
Seeming
incompatibility.
Yeah, what they were trying to do is they were trying to use the incompatibility between theory of relativity and quantum theory to try to find something called the theory that describes everything.
Okay,
right? The theory that would bridge those two.
Right. Because they were trying to say, these different theories contradict each other.
Right. It's called the grand unified field theory.
Yeah.
Well, they don't really contradict. They're just kind of different. They give different results.
Yeah.
Einstein's gives good results for macro stuff like galaxies, solar systems, things like. Well, Newton is even pretty good on solar systems. Einstein's kind of big. Quantum theory is really small. They can't really get both of them to work together. That's why I said they're pretty much giving up on the entire idea that space and time is fundamental and that you can describe all space-time with space-time rules, because what's more fundamental, I mean, they just won a Nobel Prize for disproving reality.
Wow.
Like they're like, yeah, dude, it only exists when we're looking at it. Like our conscious, like we got to start figuring out, like thinking more fundamental than even space-time.
That's awesome.
You know,
man.
then we all decide, hey man, this game's pretty cool. But then we like take off our headsets and we're like, oh yeah, shoot, yeah, this is actually what we are, right? We're not the characters in the game.
Yeah.
And you take off your headset, you've been playing it for a long time, you almost forgot, and then your mom comes and unplugs your headset, and it all fades away, and you're like, oh, shoot, yeah, that was just all made-up stuff that my consciousness was experiencing.
And you're so attached to it, you identify with it, you're sad when something's gone, and it's all, doesn't even matter. You
might even have a little avatar girlfriend who might actually be a 45-year-old man, you know, and you might have little internet kids, and who knows, right? But
yeah.
You get so wrapped up in it. So in the analogy, you know, like our brains are the headset. Our consciousness is just putting on the brain to experience it. It's like pulling the character out of the game and putting it in a robot that has little camera eyes and stuff. And this AI character can now, like, see stuff outside of the video game. It's like, whoa, now my input is from this other world, and there's people walking around. And then for the AI character, it's got to be a disappointment, because it's like, yeah, this world's also just a simulation.
It's interesting. Most of the time, just like the atheists, we human beings we bark up the wrong tree based on the most insane assumptions about life and reality and so-called proof and stuff and evidence and all that stuff.
Now, if that is where, you know, the advanced physicists and stuff are at, I mean, your guess being like, there's no scientific proof for God.
Right.
I'm like, dude, the world of science has gotten much more weird than your imagination could hold, dude.
Right.
Trust me. like if you're asking for, you don't even understand where science is at right now. You wouldn't know scientific proof if it bit you on your butt.
Yeah.
Like the fact that our consciousness has to exist before, you know, the most fundamental particles of the universe can exist should tell you something about the unbelievability of how we got everything wrong, that this physical world around us existed and then made us. It's like no consciousness made the universe.
Wow.
So
that's awesome,
anyway,
man. I appreciate the feature here, CJ in Texas.